Hello, Global Theater. My name is Jerry Fielka. Today is November 29, 2022. I want to thank Rob Grant and this amazing podcast. I'm probably wrong about everything. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here with Frederic. Yeah, I'm going to blow this. Say it,
All
Frederic.
right, Guarino.
Guarino. Very
Yep.
good, Frederic.
All right.
Where the heck are you calling in from?
I'm calling in from Montreal, Quebec.
How cool is that? The first question is, what is the best thing for a human being?
The best thing, I think, to keep curiosity as your everyday goal.
Nice. What is your favorite form of information? How it comes into you?
That's really interesting. I'm a sponge for all kinds of information. I think I'm gravitating more and more towards oral information. So I love interviews. I do a ton of interviews myself as an interviewer. So this is kind of new, me being the interviewee. I want to thank you for the opportunity. And podcasts, I can't get enough of them.
Why do you think humans collect or gather information?
It's a good question. I think humans need information to, depending on the type it is, kind of process where they're at and where they're going, and hopefully learn something along the way. Hence the curiosity as your kind of everyday goal, which, I try and live by that every day.
Yeah. Is this need or want to collect information more innate or more invented?
I think it's innate, because when you look at where we're coming from, I mean, when we started, you asked me what I studied. So I studied political science, I studied journalism, but I'm also a longtime history buff and history student. My godfather is a historian, and that's what I wanted to do when I was 6, 7 years old, because I thought it was really awe-inspiring to know kind of, where we're coming from, to kind of think about where we're going. So you look at how and I flew over the place. You look at how we started, a band of hunter-gatherers, 100,000 or so years ago in the Rift Valley in Africa. If we weren't able to process information as our kind of innate superpower, we wouldn't have gone out and peopled the entire globe.
Yeah. Do thoughts create emotions?
Yeah, of course they do.
Fill in the blank. I don't know what I think until I
hear myself, either my inner voice or my outer voice actually voice it.
Voice it. Yeah. Well, I got it from McLuhan. Says, I don't know what I think until I say it. Joan Didion says, I don't know what I think until I write it.
Yep.
So I like
that.
Yeah, I like you differentiated. We're going to get into this inner and outer voices.
Sure.
Can humans think without language?
No, because I think what makes us humans is language, and the ability to have a conversation like the one we're having now. And this is what makes us who we are as a species, and will always be the differing point between us and whatever type of supposed thinking machines we're able to build. I teach a course right now on AI, and it's fascinating to look at the history of the two words. And if you'll allow me, there's a French thinker who spent a lot of time in your neck of the woods in California called Edgar Morin, who has an aphorism on artificial intelligence. He says, yeah, there's artificial intelligence, but I'll say it in French, there's also la connerie naturelle, which means there's also natural bullshit. And it's a very funny but deep thought when you think about it, because humans are natural sponges of information. They're natural bullshitters in the proper sense of the word, meaning we like to spin a tale. So going back to your question, language is so fundamental. It's the first sentence in the Old Testament.
Yeah.
At the beginning, there was the word. I think it's foundational for us, really.
Really good. We're going to get into this. AI thing was great. What was the spelling on that gentleman's name who said that?
Morin, M-O-R-I-N. He spent time at the Salk Institute in '68.
Very good. So Chomsky says a language is not just words. It's a culture, a tradition, a unification of community, a whole history that creates what a community is.
That's right.
Frederic, what do you do when language doesn't work, when language breaks down?
We see it every day. You try and be a bridge. That's what I try and do as a dot connector, which you liked as one of the ways I have to define myself. So I was born in France. I learned French as my mother tongue. I came to the US where I grew up when I was 8 years old. I learned English as my second language. I now live in the province of Quebec, which is a French-speaking province in Canada. And I spend my days switching between the two languages. And it's wonderful mental gymnastics. And I recommend it to everybody because language being so foundational to culture and your frame of reference to the world, if you're able to look at things in more than one language, I think it makes us better citizens. It makes us better people. I know I have friends who speak 5, 6 languages, and I've seen them switch, and their tone of voice switches, the way they relate to the world switches, because that's a product of the culture. And it's, Chomsky is definitely an interesting reference when it comes to this stuff. He's thought a lot about it. And language is breaking down around us. If you think of how we're exchanging stuff, on these tools, where at the same time, it's a really powerful connection vehicle. That's what it's meant to be. But it also breaks us down in the sense that we're losing the ability to relate to simple messaging. And that's what I try and do in the sustainability space and in the climate movement. I interviewed a guy that you may know of called David Fenton, who's been a long time activist in the field. And David says something so true, that there is no chance for us in the climate action movement that I'm a part of to build it en masse if we don't spend more time on language, if we don't spend more time on messaging, because we're bombarded right now, Jerry, with information on, COP27 failed. Not true. This thing is happening, that thing is happening. And we use these words that nobody understands. And I'm paraphrasing what David shared with me, and he's right. People at the core, they don't get emissions. They don't get carbon. They don't get net zero. That's gobbledygook jargon. What they do get, and that's David's point, they get pollution. They get that. So he keeps hammering the point that repetition is good, simple messaging is good, and that's where a lot of the social movements that have been successful in the past have gravitated towards repetition, simple, understandable slogans. But where he comes in, and he's right, and I'm part of that world now as I teach in a university here, people in the university field, let's call it that, they gravitate towards complexity, but without the ability to explain it simply. And that's where things get off track.
Yeah. Dude, I really appreciate this. You're teaching me a lot, and you're really talking to me on layperson's terms. That's what I really appreciate. Rachel Carson introduced that word pollution to me in 62 through her book Silent Spring. That thing has pursued for that many years, but it's George Lakoff says you got to use the existing tools and invent new ones.
That's right.
So it's a real challenge. What you're talking about there was beautiful and then articulate, and I agree with you. Basic stupid question. I know it's both and it depends. Are we humans more thinking beings or more feeling beings?
I'm going to have to say 50-50, if not 60-40,
Yeah.
because true thought in the human sense has to include feeling. And this is where we get off track with AI when we are trying to build machines that are supposedly like us, but they will never be because, again, I'm quoting Edgar Morin, when has an artificial intelligence created a specific animal species? It never can, because it's basically a tool. So I would say we are feeling first, and that's a plus and a minus, because we have primal emotions that make us greedy, that make us selfish, that make us not think about tomorrow the way we should. Hence, everything that we're trying to do in the climate movement. But at the same time, we're capable of compassion, we're capable of empathy, we're capable of altruism, we're capable of cooperation. And again, we go back to the beginning. We're not the most evolved physically species on the planet. We're not the strongest. Why did we flourish? Because of collaboration, because we're able to work with each other.
Amazing. Two questions from Alan Turing, 1950s. Is thinking a function of the soul?
Big question. Yes. Yes, it is. And if you gravitate to religious conceptions of life, and you believe in the afterlife and the permanence of souls, it makes total sense. I'm a bit skeptical on that front. What I do believe in is the power of ideas, and the power of ideas to outlive you.
Yeah.
You look at a guy like McLuhan that brought us together, in a sense. His ideas have outlived him, and they will continue, because he has a way to look at everything around us having to do with information that makes it digestible when we feel that we're bombarded, again, to use that terminology, or over burdened with information. And there's a famous aphorism where too fed with we're overfed with information, and we're lacking wisdom. And that's what I think a lot of people are looking for in this new media age. Is they're looking for the signal in the noise.
Yep. The second Turing question is, can machines think?
Okay, so this opens up everything I've been working on with AI and the course I'm teaching. And my answer is no. Because if we're looking at thoughts in the human sense, they cannot.
Yeah.
For two reasons. One is they've yet to become self-aware. They're not aware of who they are. We delegate tasks to them, and they accomplish those tasks, but they're not aware of themselves or of the task. We just tell them to do something. It's input, output. Are we going to be in a position soon enough that they're going to be more evolved as machines? Yes. Are they going to be able to think of themselves as machines? We better hope not, for the simple reason that we would create in a second a huge underclass that we need to think about giving rights to.
Yeah.
So,
do you more pursue happiness or more pursue meaning?
I pursue happiness through meaning.
Yeah.
See, I've changed careers because everything I was doing in tech was not providing me with happiness because it had no meaning anymore.
Yeah.
So I think both absolutely need to be linked. And if you're fortunate enough, and I am thankfully, to be in a position to make that kind of choice, make it. Make
Yep.
that choice. Make that choice. It's hard. It's painful. But if you do it for the right reasons, wow, you come out of the other side and it's another world.
Well spoken. Does the brain more detect consciousness or create consciousness? Like, is consciousness there bubbling away and we're detecting it, or are we creating it?
I think we're creating it.
Yeah.
I think we're creating it, and we're creating much more than consciousness. I think we're creating our world. We're creating by naming, by seeing, by feeling, we're creating what's around us. Reality, the way we perceive it, is a tiny percentage of what goes on.
Yeah.
And this is why, if we go back to, the McLuhan type references, there was a very interesting article which referenced McLuhan by Ezra Klein a couple months ago on how his brain, he was talking about how his brain was rewired because of social media. And that spoke to me a lot, because Ezra really encapsulated the reality that we've created for ourselves. And the key question now is, are we able to break that reality and build a new one, to go back to your Lakoff reference?
Yeah.
That's really the big issue right now.
It's big. Yeah. What's faster, speed of light or speed of thought?
Speed of thought.
Dude, there's no right or wrong answers to any of these questions, but that one you got right. Bravo. Audre Lorde said, you can't dismantle the master's house using the master's tools. Yvonne Rayner responded, said, you can if you expose the tools. Yes. What new tool do you suggest?
Oof. That's a big one. So, okay. Before I answer, let me give you a little bit of a train of thought here I've been working on for quite some time. So McLuhan wrote his most famous phrase, the medium is the message, and therefore the medium is worthy of study as much as what it carries, in a world where broadcast was the norm. Okay. Now I inverted the sentence, and have tried, and I'm writing up a text on this, that it's no longer in that order. Right now, the messages that you exchange on these devices are the media. Because when you think about it, that's how most people now are consuming information. It's narrowcasted versus broadcasted. That has a lot of implications in the fabrication of reality. And the tool that we need is, we need the tool of reaggregation, not to necessarily go back to the broadcast model, but we need to go back to an ability to traverse silos. So right now, I've got on my computer, I don't know, 5 or 6 messaging tools that don't speak to each other. That's a big mistake.
Yeah.
What we absolutely need is we need universal access. That's the tool.
Yeah.
Now,
Universal access. That is really well put. Yeah. If you want to expound on it, go ahead. But we move on and see that things will come back around.
sure. Now let's move on. Let's move on.
What new toy do you suggest?
I suggest a toy that I used in the early 2000s called Trillion, which allowed you to speak at the same time to AOL Messenger, Yahoo Messenger, and whichever ICQ at the same time. So I really believe, and this goes back to the language part, if we all spoke in a different tongue, and it's the Tower of Babel, and we don't understand each other, we're not able to collaborate. We're not able to thrive. We're not able to build on each other's strengths. The same happens in the digital world if we let these oases, or so-called, prosper, but there's no commons. There's a problem. So
Yeah.
I've been working on this notion of the digital commons with friends for some time now. And, you could say we have it, it's TCP/IP, it's the internet. Yes and no, because the way things are naturally gravitating, they're naturally gravitating to these little constellations of technology, where you need to force the universality aspect, the universal access.
That's right. Forced universal access. Really good. You're really articulate. I appreciate this. And so what do you worry about when you go to bed at night?
I worry about my generation being unable to force our elders to get out of the way so that we can ally basically with our younger generations and get change done.
Yeah.
You're smack dab in New Age Central there in Venice, and the references you were giving me tell me, and I know your background. You've been in the nexus of where we could have embarked on a different world, and that whole revolution that you guys were a part of in the 60s and 70s, I don't think it failed, but it didn't catch on, and we need to understand why and not repeat the same I'm not going to say mistakes, because they weren't mistakes, but not repeat the same sets of circumstances. Okay.
Yeah.
We're fortunate now to have a couple generations younger than me. So I'm going to be 50 in a couple of years. And, you take stock at that age and you look at the younger generations, and I'm really hopeful because they're super smart. They're very driven, and they don't take no for an answer. See, I belong to this vaunted, Gen X generation, where we were kind of wedged between a couple of big cohorts there. We weren't able to really thrive as much as we thought we could. And maybe we were a bit too nice, like
A
we
bit
were
too nice.
a bit too nice. Yeah, a bit too accepting of the status quo, a bit too we're not gonna, rock the boat too much.
Yeah.
And I see the younger folks really want to rock the boat, which is a good thing.
Good.
And we need to go back to see. I'm a student of nonviolence in its true form, Gandhi, MLK, and how you're able, with the power of the idea, to get people to get off their butt and donate time to understand the fundamental truth, which is, if you're an individual, part of a collective, you're that much stronger and you can bend the will of the supposedly powerful forces.
Good.
We've been taught for the last 40, 50 years that no, you can't do that because we're an individualistic, hedonistic society. It's everyone for themselves. And, there's no such thing as the collective power, collective wisdom. That's all BS, Jerry.
It
That's
is.
all BS.
Well, it's not all BS, but a lot of it is. It's you preach, you're doing a great job, because what made me cry and be inspired was when those climate activists threw Campbell's soup on the glass in front of a Van Gogh and then super glued their hands. I says, that's the shit I want to see happening. And I was like, oh my God. No. And so you're also touching on what a Canadian said, Joni Mitchell, several years ago in an hour-and-a-half interview. She says, we were hippies, then we were yippies, now we're yuppies. And I'm a yuppie too. So, it is. So this is McLuhan learning from Ezra Pound. Artists are the antenna of the race. They're broadcasting and detecting the hidden psychic effects of our inventions, so we might learn how to cope with what we don't like about the inventions. So I ask you the question Marshall probed his whole career, Frederic. Why do we ignore the hidden psychic effects of our inventions, even though the artists are broadcasting them to us?
Because we're hardwired in our primal reptilian brains not to think about that stuff because it's just too much. It's too much. Why do you think everybody and their brother screamed holy hell when they saw the Campbell soup throwing and the glue? Because it forces you to quit the cat memeing, which is fun. I love it as much as the next guy, but it forces you to cut that and to think about the hard stuff that you don't want to think about, that you're delegating to the commentariat, that you're delegating to your elected officials. But the truth of the matter is, we cannot be a global thriving society if we don't empower ourselves. See, I give a lecture that's called We Are the Ones We Are Waiting For, because we are the ones we are waiting for. No one's coming to save us but ourselves.
Yeah.
But I'm riffing on what Obama was riffing on, because I believe in the power of simple messaging to get people to come out of their shell.
Yeah.
But it's hard. So artists are always pointing to where it hurts, and that's where they're effective, because they play to our empath being, and they do a hard job of trailblazing, most of them. And you worked for one of the biggest trailblazers. I mean, my God, that man was Zappa was. If there was a trailblazer, it was him. Jeez.
Yeah. He told David Letterman, I don't have any brown lipstick in my makeup kit. But this is great because you also evoked the artist point. One of my heroes, Marcel Duchamp, said, in the future, the artist will only have to point. So do artists have moral obligation?
Yeah, to tell the truth of where they see the culture, the zeitgeist, and like you said, the psychic energy. Where is the psychic energy right now? And what we're pretty much lacking, if you think about kind of the history of recent art forms, aside from, it was flawed, but at least it happened, the Don't Look Up film, which McKay premiered on Netflix last year. Where's the big, inspiring, get off your butt, climate action piece of art? I haven't seen one yet.
No.
Really.
Oh, no. No, there, but let's go with it. I mean, it's a great, where is it is a great question. as John Cage would say. That's a very good question, Frederic. I wouldn't want to ruin it with an answer, but indeed, I'd say, fuck you, John Cage. There is an answer, and there is somebody who can make that film, and it should be made, and it should have been made years ago.
That's right.
It's like, okay, so the word truth stands out to me because Louis Buñuel said, I'm for anyone who seeks the truth, but I part ways when they claim they found it. So 99% of people go, oh, that's great. And one guy finally said, dude, that's bullshit. If I'm going to seek something, I'm seeking it because I want to find it. And so I rephrased added the question. If the cliche goes, the journey's more important than the destination, why do we have to name or seek a destination if the journey's more important?
Because Ulysses had to come home.
That's great. Now explain that, because even me being dumb, metaphorically, what are you saying?
So the Odyssey.
Hey, Ulysses has to come home. What was a verb? Must or
needed to come home. He needed to come home.
Ulysses needs to come home. So what does that mean? Yeah. So what does that mean?
So that's one of the foundational stories in the Greek mythology of exactly your point, that the journey is paramount to the destination. The destination for Ulysses and his companions was home. It was Ithaca. But the gods made them go through hell and high water before they got there. It's a metaphor on life. So the ultimate destination is the circle, if you believe in that you're ending to be reborn potentially, and if you don't have that in your motivational regimen, it's tough to get anything done that's worthwhile. And I can't cite exactly who said it, but when you get older, as I am now, you understand that things are finite. Your presence here is finite, and that's a good thing, in the sense that it forces you to get stuff done. Yeah. Imagine if we were supposedly immortal the way somebody like what's his name, Kurzweil, wants us to be, that we download ourselves in the machine and we're these immortal beings. I mean, that's terrible, because what's your motivation? Really, if you think about it.
Yeah, I love it. I love to watch the Kurzweil movie and see him talk, and but this begs for this. So Hollis Frampton's an experimental filmmaker, and you brought up a narrative, a story that's lasted many years. I appreciate that. He says narrative is born among the animal necessities of the spirit because we're waiting to die.
Yeah.
Can you forget to die?
Like in my day-to-day, do I forget that I'm going to be, that I'm a mortal being? Sometimes, yeah.
That's good. Yeah.
Sometimes.
Are you more afraid of new ideas or more afraid of old ideas?
I'm not afraid neither of new or bold. I think we need new and bold.
Good.
All day, every day.
Frederic, can you conjure up your earliest memory ever, or one of them?
Probably. It's funny. One of my earliest memories, so it's been retold to me. I was 4 years old, and it was my first trip from France to the US. And I went to see Superman, the movie.
Yeah.
And I was so enthralled with the flying superhero that I was commenting in French in Princeton, of all places, where one of my cousins lived, the movie throughout the whole thing. That's one of my earliest memories.
You were a film enthusiast from the. Is memory more a curse or more a blessing?
I'm dealing with a lot of that right now. To me, it's a bit of both, and I'm trying very hard to make it more a blessing than a curse.
Yeah. Tell me someone within your immediate family, just briefly, and then outside your immediate family who had an impact on you, kind of like a role model. And what specifically was that impact?
So someone not blood related, but we called him uncle. He was my grandfather's best friend. Taught me the art of conversation. And taught me that one of the key parts, and you allude to this in your notes, is silence.
Yeah. Wow.
He was a big role model to me. Big role model.
Beautiful.
Big role model.
So
that's inside. So outside, role model is a big word, but somebody who I've admired as an artist, as a person, and as a general inspiration, because he designed his life. If you think of what he's been able to do, is Francis Ford Coppola. You look at that guy's accomplishments, my God. I mean, seminal works of art on film, award-winning wineries that I had the good fortune to visit, hotels, and my God.
Yeah. Really good. You got the ESP. I'm bringing them up in about 2 questions.
There you go.
Did your parents raise you a particular religion?
Nominally Catholic, because that's the culture, but I kind of grew out of it at 13, 14.
Do you pray?
No, I don't.
If God does exist, what would you like God to say to you after you die?
You had a good run. You tried. Thank you.
Good. Do evil people exist, or does evil use people as a vehicle?
No, evil people exist.
Real hidden question here, Frederic, is how do you advise someone to deal with an enemy set up with a few modern thinkers, and you knew one of them right off the bat before I asked it? Alan Watts says, if you acknowledge your enemy, you empower them. Coppola stole from the mob and the samurais. Keep your friends close and your enemies closer.
That's right.
JFK said, forgive your enemy, but don't forget their name. And Fellini says, I need an enemy. It's a lot of thoughts. The basic question is, how do you advise someone to deal with an enemy? But first, how would you respond to Alan Watts? If you acknowledge your enemy, you empower them.
Not necessarily. I disagree.
Yeah.
I disagree, because you need to name them. You need to shame them. You need to expose them.
Yeah.
But this is a powerful thread. If you allow, I'll continue on the topic.
Please.
Yes, we do need an enemy. In the climate movement that I'm a part of, the clear enemy is the fossil fuel interests, where, going back to Lakoff's point, we have these tools that have brought us, the wealth we enjoy and the comfort we enjoy. We need to change our ways. It's very hard. And our enemy is the status quo, as personified by the fossil fuel interest, who very deviously are saying, okay, you don't need to drive cars anymore to use our oil, but everything that you wear, everything that you eat, everything that you use is all made of oil-derived, whatever. And that's a hard thing for us to contend with. But we do need to call out their BS. We need to call out their lies. We need to call out their need for greed. But they have no project. If you ask David Koch, what's your project beyond being an evil person? He doesn't have an answer, because there's no project. It's
There's
not like
no
he's
project. That is
it's not like he's building anything. What is he building? It is, I keep saying this time and again, it is a fight for the future, in the sense that we're trying to build a future, but with today's tools, very tough, and we have to keep the enemy at bay.
Yeah. Bruce asked the question, on what occasion do you lie? How would you respond?
As few times as possible, only when you have to.
Yeah, that's good. No, Tom Waite says, I didn't know I needed an occasion. James Joyce was the first projectionist in Dublin 100 years ago. He basically checked out. He said, this is stupid. Why should I go inside a building and see a movie of a tree when I can go outside and see a real tree? Years later, Faulkner said, sometimes the best fiction is more true than journalism. Why do we have to recreate things in order to get them? Why do we have to go to a theatrical play of people acting out life? Why don't we just live life?
That's really profound. And it goes back to our ability, or lack thereof, of being able to think about ourselves beyond the media, plural, that are available to us, which have always been, go back to the caves. Why did the cavemen draw? Because they needed to project their world. Okay.
Yeah.
Then we acquired language and we started to tell stories. Then we wrote the stories down all the way to plays and then movies and all that. My personal inclination to this thread is, we have a built-in need to hear ourselves be told, this is what you are living, to see kind of mirror images of ourselves, of our settings. Like you look at 1950s America with Leave It to Beaver and all those shows that were a product, but also a standard almost of, this is America in that time capsule.
Yeah.
This has been true forever. And what's interesting and what's exciting is that we're moving beyond typical narration in the way it's restituted on screens, because I've dabbled into 360 video, into VR and AR and all those different types of storytelling techniques, which are breaking the typical framing, which has been with us for the past 100 or so years. And what's exciting is that there are people that are breaking through these media, but it's hard. Again, you're with today's tools, you need to invent the next set of tools.
Yeah. But what you said was really heavy. Think beyond ourselves. No, to think of ourselves beyond the media.
Yeah.
Is that what you said? Beyond the media? Yes. Because this is Marshall's big thing about narcissism as narcosis. He says there's a reinterpretation of this. And it's like you fall in love not with your image of yourself, you fall in love with the machine, the mirror itself that humans, invented. Another word I'm curious about is biomimicry, because Marshall, well, let's go into this for a second. Well, no, let's hold off, because we'll get out of order. We'll go out of order, but we'll get to this thing, the extension in biomimicry? I'm just going to write this down so I don't
Sure.
forget. So the
Sure.
next question is, what first attracted you to pursue your first study, political science? And maybe your first study was history, right? You really got
It was both. It was both. So yeah. So
history and
what?
political science. Like then
Right.
where was the tipping point? You're growing up,
Yep.
and where's that tipping point? You go, that's what I'm going to go to college and study. That's what I'm going to be, you know.
So again, dot connecting. History allows you to dot connect the past to try and ascertain what can come next.
Yeah.
And then you figure, okay, history at some level is the product of political decisions. So political science, if it is a science, is worthy of study to get a sense for the levers of power, who controls them, how they get there, what they use it for. And it all goes back to media because, and I've been writing and thinking long and hard about this, we as a democratic society, or societies plural, we're the products of media landscapes.
Yeah.
If you go back to the Age of Enlightenment, the Age of Enlightenment is a couple centuries after Gutenberg's Bible, because thought was no longer limited to your immediate circle or your letter writing. You could propagate thought, and you insert coffee where you're using it as a social lubricant. People are able to debate ideas and circles of thought are formed, and that's the revisiting of the classical, Greek democratic ideals in the proto-modern world. But that only happened because of media. Fast forward to early 20th century. The 19th, we forget, was very similar to today. You had very powerful business interests that were dictating their agenda, okay? You had William Randolph Hearst, who basically engineered a war no one needed just to sell copy. You had yellow journalism all over the place. It is not, it was better before. No. It was a terrible time. And it only got better when regulation stepped in. So if you try and equate the timelines, right now, we're in that era, but with a new set of tools. And that's where we know we need regulation desperately to try and tame the beast, so to speak, of social media and everything that I was talking about, where we're narrow casting and all that business. Can we force reaggregation? No, but we can put regulation in place that will naturally favor reaggregation, that will favor the atoms to come back together, because that's their natural order in life, basically.
It's really good. Screenwriting teacher told me great art is when you can clearly see the intention of the maker. Kubrick says the opposite. Great art is when you can clearly not see the intention of the maker. What role does intention play in your creative process when you're writing?
So since I mostly write, I've dabbled into a kind of fiction, but I mostly write nonfiction analysis and the like. The intent is always clear. I'm trying to do what Joan Didion was saying that you cited before, basically put order in my thoughts to understand them better, to hopefully debate them with others.
Yeah.
And enrich myself in that type of conversation. So the intent is always clear, but I want to go back to Kubrick's word there. I'm a big Kubrick fan. I think he's one of the most gifted directors
Yeah.
in the film industry ever. But I think he's dead wrong there. Dead wrong. Dead wrong.
He's
Dead
probably
wrong.
pulling your leg too, Frederic. I think you took him too seriously. But
Yeah.
it sets up the question well. But go ahead. Why is Stanley wrong there? That's good.
Well, Stanley was a big believer in naturalistic filmmaking, and he's
Yeah.
one of the masters.
Yeah.
But if you think about it, when he begs NASA to give him the very sensitive film and apparatus to be able to shoot Barry Lyndon in natural light, which is crazy. Like, if you go to a producer and say, I'm going to shoot this 18th century film without lights,
Yeah.
the producer would say, you're nuts, man. It's never going to work. He was able to do that. The intent is very profound there.
Yeah.
He was trying to recreate a real time capsule. It goes back to your question and your point. Why do we gravitate to these strong works of art like that? Because in essence, they are time capsules. They're almost time machines in the sense that when you watch Barry Lyndon, you have a window into how life was at the time. Because it's not a recreation in a fictitious sense, even though it is fiction. He's trying to get as true to what it was.
Yeah. It's like Godard saying Hollywood films are just documentaries of actors acting.
Well, so let's stop there. Because I was thinking about that before talking to you. Film is a really interesting medium in the sense that is probably the most self-referential ever. Okay. Novels. When has there been a successful novel about somebody writing a novel? Very rarely, because it's super boring, because it's a guy sitting at a table or a woman sitting at a table writing. Who cares? What's interesting about film is that it's collaborative, that it's always, if you pardon my French, a shit show. Having been involved in film time and again, I'll talk about that. I can attest to the fact. And there's a lot of drama involved. And that's why it's self-referential. And if you look at it like that, it's one of the only mediums in history that is able to be self-referential in an entertaining way. Do you like seeing a social media account about social media? No, nobody cares. So you can't be self-referential in every medium. And film is really special that way.
Well put, Frederic. What a pleasure. There is a book that basically McLuhan got everything he knows from that is self-referential, and that's Finnegan's Wake. It satirizes the sensory overload we live in, and it's great that he was able to say, "This is where I got everything I know." But back to Marshall being such a influential character, the quote, Stanley, why did you make 2001? And Stanley said, to convolate Marshall McLuhan. And then, did you know this?
No. Wow.
Oh, it's in the Playboy interview. Here's the greatest film ever made, 2001. God. Why did you make it? To convolate, to twist Marshall McLuhan. Then he invited McLuhan to the first, pre-release screening, or one of the first, and Marshall fell asleep after 10 minutes.
I'm not surprised.
But he probably woke back up and blah, blah, blah. I wish we could pull out the whole story and know the whole thing. What happened with Stanley and Marshall? Anyways, Duchamp said there's no art without an audience, because I know that you are a creative person in writing nonfiction. So I know it's, we're talking about words, but and their meanings, but what role does the reader play when you're writing your book, when you're writing your lecture or writing? How much are you thinking of your reader?
That's all I think about.
Yeah.
That's all I think about, because first of all, I want to be my own first reader and enjoy it.
Yeah.
That's the first thing. That's the first test. And then hopefully you have, and I'm thankful that I have that in my immediate circle, a good friend who's my sort of always first reader of my stuff. And I always think of him when I write.
Yeah.
And the next people I think of are my two sons, who are more and more interested in what I do, and have been asking me to share some of the stuff that I write.
That
So
is
it's really important. It's really important. But
bravo to you.
it's a challenge. It's a
Yeah.
challenge. It's a
Yeah.
challenge.
So we know Marshall said everything humans invent extends some humanness. He
Yep.
called it the human sensorium.
Yep.
Knife and fork extend our teeth, blah, blah, blah. He also said that the most human thing is technology. So we're
Yep.
extending, what does the writing utensil extend for you? Whether it's a pen or a keyboard, what humanness does it extend for you?
Reflection.
Yeah, great. Now that's perfect lead in. We're like two jazz musicians. So Marshall reinterpreted narcissism in the great, little chapter, narcissism as narcosis, saying that, it was more the medium, the media that we fall in love with, not the reflection that the myth says. The guy looks at water and sees himself and falls in love with the reflection of himself.
Right.
Well, in essence, that's biomimicry, because we didn't invent water as a reflective medium. We invented the mirror
That's
because
right.
we said, hey, water does this. Let's invent something that does that. So that's called biomimicry. So
Yeah.
have you ever thought about this? I mean, it just came up when I learned it from Caroline Casey, Coyote Network News. She brings it up a lot. And I wish we could have talked to Marshall about it, or maybe he's touched on it. This thing where it's almost a flip or a Mobius strip or a snake eating itself. In that, the guy who invented Velcro looked at this plant and
Yep.
went, I can do that with, human made substance. And so we looked at so any thoughts on that?
Oh yeah, biomimicry is fascinating because I go back to your point on technology being the extension of humans.
Yeah.
Everything that we do technologically is about hopefully gaining time to do other things than plow the field.
Yeah.
And you look at most messaging and most advertising and design on one of the engines, and they use the word apropos of economic development, the car, the eyes, the face. You try and biomimic or project humanness on pieces of steel, basically, because you try and have a rapport with something that especially in the North American ethos, spells liberty, spells freedom, freedom of movement. Now, if you go to a computer, how human is a computer? Well, it didn't used to be human. Look at the genius of the first Macs, early 80s, when it started to talk to you. You had a face welcome you when you were opening the screen instead of lines of code. That's the first step of biomimicry in the computer age. And what's interesting, when you think about it, we haven't really gone beyond that because our phones don't show up with a face that welcomes you. Siri, yeah, more or less a voice, but not the visual senses. We know that the next step is going to be these 3D holographic, whatever, biomimicry infused assistants that are going to be helping us do whatever. And then the ultimate thing is going to be, and it's already coming, robots that are going to be our helpers, especially to take care of folks in their old age, because that's the only way we're gonna solve people's mobility issues and whatnot. This stuff is already happening, and if you look at the way they're designed, they're all designed to be friendly, and there's a dimension of cuteness in there. So we can't do better than that, because think of it, if we did stuff out of H.R. Geiger's head, no one would even contemplate buying a robot that looks like that, because you'd be scared. So we have, as humans, I think an ingrained and an infused sense of trying to forge the way we tell the story that God made us in His image. We're trying to make machines in our image.
Yeah.
And I gravitate to different ways of looking at that in how I teach the fusion of AI and robotics in my lectures. Everything is culture based, and a lot of the unease that we've got in the West, particularly about robots, and all of the dystopian sci-fi about how robots are taking over the world and all that jazz, that is a direct product of the way we look at it from a religious background. If you go to the East, if you go to India, if you go to Japan, I lived in Japan for 3 years, they don't have our distaste or our unease with robots, because they don't have any of the, God made us in the image, blah, blah, that we're taught, whether we believe it or not. So that's a really interesting way to try and always, balance out who we are as Westerners versus the rest of the world.
Really well put. It really inspired me. I'd love to do a salon with you and a few other people on AI in the future.
Oh, yeah.
I just had a date open in December, so I'll keep you posted on that. But
Great.
Frederic, there's so many directions we could go, but I did want to touch on this a little. Utah Phillips says that anarchy is making rules for yourself and not other people. Who's entitled to make the rules?
Hopefully yourself as part of a collective for the greater good. Hopefully.
Yeah.
That's who should be making the rules.
What's more important, conviction or compromise?
Oof. Equal helpings of both.
You are a smart thinker. I talked to Michael Apted, the filmmaker, 40 years ago. I said, why do rock video editors feel so obliged to edit fast? Most people don't know rapid montage was invented in 1922 by Abel Gance in France. But in 1980s, it really flourished with MTV. In fact, Marty Scorsese said, I cut my films faster because of MTV. Well,
and
Michael,
cocaine.
Yeah, hello. Very well put. I love when people shoot in shit in the middle of my questions, because that's what I want. I want my questions to be reworded, challenged more. Oh, Rebecca Solnit says it so well. She goes, just because you're asked a question doesn't mean you have to answer it.
Right.
Or trust the person who's wording it. But what Michael Apted said is because we've learned to take in information faster. I ask this with a bias. Can we literally learn to take in information faster, or are we just brainwashed to believe we can?
No, we can. We can. We just need to get used to, again, finding the signal in the noise. And I'm going to go back to history again.
Yeah.
When we went from a world where you could say, I read all the books because there were about 1,000, 1,200 of them, to a world with Gutenberg where there were literally too many books, many people got scared and there was already talk of information overload. And this was in the 1600s.
Wow.
Okay. Every age has had to acclimate to the diet of information that is commensurate with the technology that allows the propagation of ideas.
Yeah.
So it takes a bit of getting used to. I think we're on the way. Okay. The internet's been around for 30 plus years. We're kind of getting an understanding of how to encapsulate it into and integrate it into our lives. Not all for the better, but mostly if you go into it with the right mindset. So I don't think we're brainwashing ourselves into our ability to take in the information. The question is, once you've taken the information, what do you do with it?
Yep.
Are you able to use it, process it, regurgitate it in a useful way, remix it? And I think we live in a fascinating time now with memes. I was just talking right before the interview started. I was talking to my 12-year-old who is really into memes. And I think it's a fascinating culture because it is at the speed of thought. It is a way to share an idea very quickly. I love emojis. I love GIFs. I love having whole conversations in GIFs because they're a novel way to, again, think about language in a new way. Yeah. So I think we're going to come out of this kind of rough age of acclimation between the 20th century and the 21st to hopefully do what's missing, which is talk about the 22nd. Like I grew up in a world where you'd hear about the 21st century every day. You seldom hear about the 22nd. And that says a lot about our society, that we can't have the cojones to think about what's coming, which is what we need to build anyway. It's not coming like, a meteorite that's coming for us. No. We need to build it. And we're getting there. We're getting there.
The American Indian Indigenous say we're planning for 7 generations down the line.
Exactly.
Amazing. But the hidden question there really was, Frederic, is it literally possible for humans to multitask?
I like to think I can. Whether I can actually do it successfully is another thing.
Yeah. T.S. Eliot said poetry's outing your inner dialogue. What language is your inner dialogue in?
Depends on the days, meaning probably half French, half English.
Now, metaphorically, what language is your what form is your inner consciousness in?
Oof. What form? Like a narrative, you mean? Probably a narrative. Yeah, probably a narrative.
That's good.
Yeah.
2 of my film heroes have the mantra, ignore yourself. Jonas Mekas says, there is no self-expression. Cecil Taylor, great jazz pianist, says, I'm just a vehicle and this stuff just comes through me.
I like that.
Is art making more Again, I know it's both and it depends, just any thoughts, but is art making more self-expression or more your vehicle for whatever technologies, cultures, and environments are dominant?
I think you can be, as an artist, the voice of, again, we use the word, the zeitgeist, what's going on, and you're there to be a pollinator in the
Yeah.
true sense, meaning you're going from, one flower to the next, and you're collecting all these dots, again, using my phraseology, to tell a little bit about yourself, because there is a bit of yourself,
Yeah.
hopefully, in what you create, but you're also trying to talk about your era, your brethren, your people. You go to the best novels of Russian literature in the 19th century. They were talking about their screwed up world, which is as screwed up today as it was then. The same for the Edwardian novelists who were having to contend with this wealthy society built on the backs of slavery that didn't speak its name, and the same for what we're still missing, which is I'm still waiting for the definitive film on the Iraq War. Where
Yeah.
is it? Like,
Yeah.
we had umpteenth wonderful films, Apocalypse Now, of course, being one of the best
Yeah.
in trying to portray the just sheer absurdity of war in Vietnam. We didn't get that with Iraq. We didn't get that really with Afghanistan. We got a few. There's a few interesting ones that are very introspective, that kind of show you what is it to be a young 20-year-old on the top of a mountain in Helmand province somewhere. But there's no large narrative.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. And I would include one more with the Vietnam doc called Hearts and Minds.
Yeah.
Really important stuff. The hidden question there is, can art making be egoless?
Difficult, because you are trying to leave something behind in what you're creating, if not for your immediate circle or whoever you're trying to speak to. So I have a hard time thinking of someone who's altruistic to the core, that they'd create something without injecting anything of themselves. I don't think so.
Yeah, it's amazing because most people say, no, it can't be egoless. But about a year ago, someone said, great art is egoless. And then a couple months ago, someone said, it has to be egoless. So again, it's really how the word is interpreted.
Mm,
Ego, when I get deep into it, I ask, was Freud right? So let's move on. Is perception reality?
totally. 100%.
Really great. Lewis Carroll says, I believe as many as 6 impossible things before breakfast. Have you believed in any impossible things lately?
Lately, yes.
Name one.
That we'll be able collectively to wake the hell up and understand what we're faced with as a species and get our act together.
Really good. Sunra said, amazing quote in the New Yorker of all places. They printed it. The impossible attracts me because everything possible has been done and the world didn't change.
Very true. Very true.
Tell me one major element of your creativeness, your mission, your whatever you want to call it.
Sure.
Since you started political science and history to now, one major element that's stayed the same and one major element that's changed.
So, major element of what I've done that stayed the same.
Well, what I've done, you can put that into the context you want, like
Okay.
your Fredericness,
Right. I would say what stayed the same is the ability to not get BS'd, in the sense to stay outraged in
Oh,
a positive way.
wow.
Outrage in a positive way.
That is really inspiring. I love that. What's one major element that's changed?
My ability to channel the outrage into something not positive, because I know I can channel it positively. Whether or not I can convince others to come along for the ride, that's another thing. That's what I'm working on.
Anger can be a productive emotion when fill in the blank.
When you channel it into a productive endeavor. And
Yeah.
that's what I've been doing the past couple years, is channel my anger into what I'm doing, which is lectures, organizing events, getting people together, interviewing, keeping my curiosity to the max.
It's good. Real inspiration to me. Thank you. Moshe Feldenkrais works with healing and movement. He says it's literally possible to identify a weakness and incorporate it to become a strength, rather than we're normally taught to overcome a weakness.
Yeah.
Tell me a weakness you turned into a strength.
So this goes back to the multitasking part. Multitasking can be procrastination.
Yeah.
But if you turn that into an ability to look at either a problem or a set of problems from 5, 6 different viewpoints, you can connect those dots quicker.
Yeah. It's really good. We got about 15 more minutes.
Great.
Truly been fun, Frederic. I appreciate it.
Love the exercise.
There's a guy who says, John Basil Barnhill says, where the people fear the government, you have tyranny. Where the government fears the people, you have liberty.
Yep.
In 2005, the film V for Vendetta paraphrased it. People should not be afraid of their governments. Governments should be afraid of their people.
Oof.
How do you personally handle false fears, like the war on drugs? You can't fight drugs. You can't have a war on drugs because drugs don't fight. And you can't say no to drugs because drugs don't talk. So it's this war on fear. War on drugs, war on poverty, war on terrorism. How do you handle these false fears?
I try and deflect them, and I'm in the minority because I'm for the legalization of every form of drug.
Yeah.
Provided that there's medical care for whoever wants to take them.
Yeah.
It's a really tough thing because all these false fears, they are the primary vehicle of these populist regimes that we've seen time and again prop up again in the past decade, more recently. And we, on the other side, have a real tough time catering to the same primal brain, but on the good side. They're really good with the false fears on the negative side, and they get people to pay attention. They get people jazzed up very much quicker, much quicker and more effectively. We tend to be, this is again paraphrasing Fenton, we're like in the age of telepathy. We think because we think, people understand what we mean and they think the same thoughts. No, they don't. And we failed trying to convince. So I would say that the predomination in some circles of these false fears, that should wake us up to try and counter big time. The problem is we're not that many trying to do that effectively. Effectively.
Frederic, does punishment work? Gregory Bateson, the anthropologist, says, if the criminal gets caught, does he go, whoa, I'm doing something morally and socially wrong? Or does he go, whoa, my criminal skills weren't up to snuff that day? Basic question. Does punishment work?
Depends on the circumstance. Crime is in so many forms now, and a lot of it is hidden. Who's really criticizing white collar crime? Like, really, not that many people. And how much social decrying and how many social outcasts do you see on that side versus the millions that are populating jails for itty-bitty crimes? That being said, the use of violence is, in political theory, the predominant realm of the state. And that also means that the state needs to withhold it as much as possible, which is why the death penalty makes no sense, because it's never been a deterrent. And then two, it basically kills the idea that the state, being the monopolist in violence, should again be extremely parsimonious in its use of it. And it cannot, kill a man or woman.
Yeah. There's a line that goes, you create what you resist. Bob Goldthwait, the comedian, morphed it into, you are what you hate. In fact, James Joyce said, it's a curious thing how your mind is super saturated with the religion in which you say you disbelieve. Louis Buñuel nailed it. He said, thank God I'm an atheist. So any thoughts on this line? I'm not saying you, but you create, resist. One creates what one resists. Any thoughts on that line?
It's very profound, and Buñuel is exactly right. I mean, you are the product of the culture you come from. I can't change the fact that I'm the son and grandson of Roman Catholic, for the most part, Southern Italians. That really, it forges you. The key question is, how much are you able to come out of that culture to, one, recognize its flaws when you can, and then second, you create what you hate. It speaks to me on one level, but I can't internalize it, because I don't think the work that I do is because I hate. It's more an inversion where I'm trying to be one of the persuaders. So that's what I'm trying to create.
I like that. Can you go a little more? We got about 7 more minutes. Can you go a little over? Okay, just so I know our time schedule here. What's the most significant difference between men and women, physical aside?
Oof. I think men are allowed, or allow themselves, to be way more in the clouds than women. Like, we're much more attuned, or culturally we're pushed to be the dreamers, whereas the women have always been the backbone of societies, and they make the trains run on time. We don't.
What caused matriarchy? What caused matriarchy?
What caused matriarchy?
Yeah.
Well, first of all, matriarchy is pretty much of a minority movement, meaning there's not a lot of matriarchy out there. You see it mostly in societies so-called indigenous, where there's no money exchange, and everything is part of the collective. Those are the matriarchies. patriarchy is about accumulating riches for yourself and not for others.
So 5 Alan Watts questions, Frederic, off the top of your head, just in a few words. First one, who started it all?
That's deep. That's the first one. Jesus.
I got to tell you, one thing I loved about this time with you is when I ask you a question, you have this, it's not a word, you have a sound. You go, make that sound. It's like, It really is. It's enticing to me because we're using spoken word.
Yep.
And to hear a sound, like I'll tell you, Kelly Carlin, George Carlin's daughter, she would, after each one of these questions, she would crack up and laugh. Then she'd take a big, deep yoga breath, and then she'd answer it. So it's interesting how people react. I like that. Yeah. So
okay, so let's go back to the question. So
Yeah.
who started it all?
Yeah.
Who knows?
Good. Are we going to make it?
Yes.
Where do we put it?
Wherever we can.
Who's cleaning it up?
Mostly us, everybody.
Fifth one, is it serious?
Doesn't need to be.
Wow. You're a happy dude. How do you find peace of mind?
Doing stuff like this. I'm a big believer in conversation. I'm a huge believer in exchanging knowledge this way. And I hope this is recorded, that I can go back and look at all the references that I missed because I wasn't taking notes. You were. I just love the challenge.
Yeah.
I just love the challenge.
Challenge a conversation. Yeah, actually, that's one of Marshall's things is conversations.
Yep.
One of the highest art forms. Yeah, but it's interesting because do you think well, back to our parents, I forgot to tell you this one.
Sure.
Frank Zappa said, don't do speed, it will turn you into your parents. That's pretty good anti-drug commercial for every rock. Every rock star would get on MTV and go, I did heroin for 25 years and you shouldn't. It's like, what? You're telling me I shouldn't and you got to? So I mean, Frank didn't, but he did coffee and cigarettes, was same difference. But don't do speed, it'll turn you into your parents. Do you think you got this attraction to conversation and challenging conversation more from your parents, or more the way you were raised, or more on your own?
More on my own. Yes, not my immediate parents, but people in my family circle. The fellow I was mentioning to you, who I grew up with, kind of, in a sense. He was very present in my life, and he was the supreme conversationalist. And that's where I learned to start the art of conversation.
It's beautiful. If you were walking down the street today and you met yourself as a 12-year-old, what would you say to your 12-year-old self?
It's not going to be easy all the time, but it's going to get better.
Beautiful. Which way should toilet paper come off the roll, over or under?
Under.
Why?
More practical.
90% of people say over, and that's the way it's pictured on the patent. Yeah. But all the power to the people who say under. If a publisher was to release your autobiography, off the top of your head, what would the title be?
His take.
They want to scent the glue and the binding. What smell?
Of the binding of the book? What
Yeah.
smell?
Yep.
Oh yeah, that what's that glue called? That liquid glue, not the super glue, but it smells like paper glue.
You mean Elmer's?
Yeah, Elmer's.
Yeah. If a statue was built in your honor, where would you want it displayed and what would it be made of?
Oh my God, I would not want a statue made of myself, first of all. But were one made, where would I want it displayed? In my backyard somewhere, so just my immediate circle could see it. And what would it be made of? Clay.
Good. Tell me something good you never had and you never want,
Something good I've never had.
but you never want it.
Mm. Something good. That's a tough one. Because I'm a pretty content guy, but oodles and oodles of money
Yeah.
I've never had, nor do I want, because I've seen people change because of it.
Yeah. 3 answers I get the most: money, fame, and heroin.
Okay.
If you were in a vat of vomit up to your neck and someone threw a bag of shit at your face, what would you do?
Try and wipe it somehow.
I think you'll appreciate this one, Frederic. A lot of people hate me for asking that question, but this
Go ahead.
woman on the Venice boardwalk once said, I'd take the velocity of the bag of shit coming at my head and I'd use it to swoop my way out of the vat of vomit.
That's a good one.
And I said, do you know that is the first book entry in McLuhan? It's called The Descent into the Maelstrom, the short story by Edgar Allan Poe. You know, the sailor boats get smushed by the whirlpool and studies the pattern, dot connector, out of the swoops his way out.
Wow.
That's sort of like what we say, reading Finnegan's Wake out loud with a group of people is like, what McLuhan did with the Mechanical Bride book is that we can use this sensory overload and to our advantage.
Exactly.
If advertising works, then why don't we use their techniques to educate people? It's not like some evil thing they're doing. They're just doing symbolist poetry.
Exactly. Yep.
What's the cultural shift you see developing today that inspires you?
Altruism.
Suss that out. What do you mean by that?
I mean, the kids that are gluing themselves to art or throwing the soup and all that, they're not doing that for fame and fortune. They're doing that to wake people up, and that's altruistic. And that's not a novel form, but it's a rejuvenated form of activism that we sorely need, because in every tide shift that we've experienced as societies, as modern societies, we've had these pioneers who led the way, so-called radicals, and we got what we needed because we told the powers in place, do you want them or do you want us, the moderates, who actually get stuff done? And that's how the moderates always win, if they're just one step behind the radicals.
Wow. Got about 3 more and we're out of here. I haven't formed this question yet, but I heard Jaron Lanier say something like algorithms are going to be the end of humanity.
I don't believe that.
Yeah. And it's like, has any human thing ever ended any big culture?
No.
No, it was nature's things that ended culture.
That's right.
Right. It wasn't human invention.
Never.
It's like, get over it. Yeah.
Get over yourself. And it doesn't surprise me that Jaron says stuff like that, because he can be wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But he is one of the few that invented the whole thing and says you should pay a little attention to it. You know,
No, I agree.
what
and
changing
I,
us.
and I spend a lot of time, and we'll do the salon whenever you want in December on AI. It's fascinating stuff, but it remains, as you said, a human invention. And to go
Yeah.
back to the McLuhan media ecology analysis, no media has ever killed another. They just make room. You make room for the millefeuille of other media types and media forms.
Yeah, I think we can do the salon on the flip. If you flip AI to IA, that's McLuhan's main thing, integral awareness. And
Yep.
he got it a lot from T.S. Eliot, auditory imagination. So it's just a flipping of what AI is. But I
Sure.
love the potential that really inspires me. So Thornton Wilder said in 1928, art is confession, art is the secret told, but art is not only the desire to tell one's secret, it's the desire to tell it and hide it at the same time.
Mm.
You've laid your cards on the table for over 90 minutes. I'm not insinuating you haven't already answered this. What's it really all about for you?
What's it really all about? Persuading that's what it's all about.
That is amazing. A verb. That's Bucky Fuller. I seem to be a verb. Not the persuaders, but persuading.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Do you ever study NLP?
Yes.
Whoa. That's like the art of persuasion, right?
Yep. Yep. Yeah.
Frederic, what a joy and a pleasure. Last question is, what gives you the most optimism?
My kids and their generation.
Yeah.
Maybe it's wide-eyed, but I really believe it.
No, that's the answer I get the most. That's inspiring about doing these for 40 years. That question is answered. Youth, my kids,
Yeah.
But it's funny because the first question is, what's the best thing for a human being? And Wilhelm Reich said the best thing for a human being is another human being.
True.
And they asked Groucho Marx, what gives you the most optimism at the end of his life? And he says, other people. So it's sure been fun spending time with you.
Likewise.
Another person. I'll end with a McLuhan phrase that's, I think, is applicable. He said, communication of the new is a miracle, but it's not impossible. You've sure communicated a lot of newness to me, Frederic, and I'm really grateful. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jerry.
I'm going to hit the end broadcast button, but this, I hope, will never end. We'll just keep talking forever.
Oh, yeah.
And